Welcome to the Woman Who Rubs the Mountain podcast, a gathering place for conversations about ecological embodiment and intimacy with place. I'm your host, Kendra Ward, acupuncturist and land alchemist, currently living on traditional Abenaki land in what is now called Vermont. In these explorations, we wonder, what happens when we rub on the body of the earth? How does the earth brush back against us? Waking up from a great forgetting, these inquiries bring us to the fluid interfaces of human body and land body. Along the way, it's my hope that we diversify our sense of relational kinship, discover creative, disruptive ways of living beyond our human-centric tendencies, and make wide space for a new, old, earth-honoring culture to reemerge. Because in these joy-soaked but bleak times, falling in love with the land and the beings where we live is truly the basis of healing and reconciliation, a resistance against ecocide, and the special work of our human hearts used well. My guest today is Carina Lyall, host of the popular podcast Becoming Nature, where she interviews peers from around the world on topics such as sustainability, the wild, skill building, and climate issues. For the past 13 years, Carina has worked with groups and in retreat settings, and she has years of experience in holding space for transformation. Her focus is on community, nature, storytelling, and rewilding in the modern world. Carina was born in northern Canada with deep roots to the Indigenous people of that place, and she now lives with her family of 5 in the woods of Denmark. I really appreciated Carina's thoughtful presence and the way that she resists rushing through to simpler answers. Our conversation features this lovely cast of characters, including pheasant, squirrel, and swan. And there are plenty of stories of local intimacies. So let's get to the conversation. I hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening. Well, welcome, everyone. Before we begin, I'd just like to acknowledge the larger geographies, the big sacred intelligences, the rivers, hills, trees, soil, the clouds, that we don't just live with, but live in. So let us all just take a moment to feel into and connect with the place where we are, allowing the old spirit and vast resonances to rise up into the room with us, into our hearts, into this conversation, into this stilling, into our speaking and our listening. Letting that just vibrate outwards for a moment. And I'm so excited to hear more about the place where you live, Carina. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about how you find intimacy with this place, particularly from your body, from this body felt sense. And I'm wondering not only how you kind of press into and find intimacy with this place, but also how this place finds intimacy with you or even dreams you into being.
Well, I've placed this desk that I'm sitting at overlooking the water that's in front of the house. And to my right is the beginning of the forest. So we live like in between land. And I like to observe. So right now, intimacy for me is following Papa Pheasant, who uh, has two ladies, which is quite fun that he's taking care of. And they have their certain routine. So just observing their routine, like when we wake up in the morning, he's sitting on the same table. And this has been 2 weeks now. Stands at the same time, same table, and which is becoming very calming in my body to like, oh, okay. Now I'm recognizing some routine in myself, watching their routine. And the mamas are feeding. And then around the time where the kids wake up and the coffee is done, they take a little walk across the courtyard thing we have. And where they go, I don't know yet. But the intimacy of knowing that our life is happening here and their family life is happening there. And we're sort of watching each other in terms of he's, he knows our routine and we know his routine. That feels very intimate to have that window into pheasant family life for now. And I take on, I think, that sense that it's, for me, the element of observing the intelligence of the land around me and how I have no clue. I've just scratched the surface of what's going on. And the intimacy of getting to know such a little piece of land so well that I know the flowers that come up here. And then sometimes like, oh, wow, they've moved and they've migrated from there to there. And to me, it's like, well, so what? What do you use that for in the terms of stress reduction or whatever? But that's intimacy. Is like, wow, okay, so this is new, or that's happening, or hey, old friend, how has winter been for you? And knowing that in my body, okay, now it's time to do something, and noticing the stress of harvest. It's like, oh no, now the season has started, and if I want to get all the herbs in time, I'm in a hurry from now until June, July, August. So it's subtle, and it's also something that has taken 9 years so far to get to know. That's how long we've lived here. That's how long this land has taken to allow me to get to know it and show me its secrets and growth. And yeah. And that does something to me. And I can't tell you what other than it's relationship building. And I love this piece of land. And now I'm moving, which is weird. But yeah.
Tell me about your move. What's happening with that?
Well, this is rental for one, which has also been a thing. Like this is my workplace and where my family lives, and up in the back in the forest, that's where I've done courses for the last 9 years, as long as we've been here. And it's rental, which is also, when you the response to renting land is, well, why do you do so much work on something that's not yours? And I find in general, owning land is a bit of a yeah, let's not get into that. That's another thing, but we don't own it. So I own this land as much as I'm going to own the land we've now bought, which is a little piece. But it was time for us to move. And so we're taking all our stuff and moving to the other end of the forest, away from the water, but also away from a road. And it has a different feel. So I won't be able to work there. But it's going to be good and interesting to get to know that place now. What's that? What animals have their morning routines there, and who will let me witness that? So it's griefful as well, how to let something very exciting exists alongside grief of having to say goodbye, and the sorrow knowing that the owners of this house don't have the same relationship to nature and uh, this place as we do. So we've been able to hold the poison stuff away from this piece of land for a long time, and I don't like to think about what they're going to do once we're out. But,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, just the freshness of a new relationship, all the things that come with that. There's sort of like a freshness to your sight, like any new relationship, it can kind of have its honeymoon period but yeah, that holding of both the grief and the excitement of all the new friends to make, although it sounds like there's a continuation in the land. You're not going so far, similar ecosystem. And yeah. So
I know the fox den that's midway from here,
the connection point to the other
house. Yeah. He also ate all our chickens, so we'll see.
Oh my goodness. We've had a lot of fox visits this spring, and it's so funny how everyone's reaction is, it's good you don't have chickens. And I'm like, that's such a fairy tale type of response. That's like the immediate response that everyone has. But it's also true on some level,
It's also reality.
Yeah, it's also reality. That age-old fox and chicken relationship.
Yeah. But it's not an enemy.
Yeah.
It's not an enemy.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, just in terms of, I'm always looking to kind of move myself past just ideas of that I'm kind of rubbing into or pressing up against the place where I am. Like when, you're touching a tree, that also the tree is touching you back, this sense of call and response, this, this elevation in our way of thinking about things. And I'm curious how you're relating these days to this sense of call and response to the more than humans around you, if there are any practices or rituals. And I know these types of things are ever moving and evolving and changing according to like your mood and the season, but I'm just wondering what you've been up to lately.
Well, I've always thought about that as I walk. Like when I witness Swan is also, taking me into consideration. Like, what are my steps and moves? And that's always been a very humbling is not the right word, but it has allowed me to decenter myself from from the whole thing, even though this, this is where my outlook is. Again, I'm back to this observing thing, because when we sit at the fire, I notice all the creatures coming out to have a look at what we're doing and if the smoke is dangerous or not, or, what's happening there. And my games have become like doing spirals in sort of the middle of the thing with walnuts and chestnuts. And then I come back 2 days later and squirrel took all the walnuts and left the chestnuts for me. And that's been a game, so to speak. It's like, okay, so there you go. And it left it in the pattern. It didn't even mess up all the chestnuts. And then I see like the woodpecker and what it's doing, and yesterday some bird we didn't know, it was new to the area, and it made a call and we called back, and then everything just went silent. So there's that interaction that's not ritualized in the sense other than it tells us something. Me and the kids, I have 3 girls, and the children have, spent most of their life now here. It just, the rituals of, and now it's that time of year. It's that time of, now the squirrels are in fights up in the trees, or mating games, or whatever it is. but I also, I like to just watch and see and notice that they're watching me. And that makes a difference in how I tread, because I need to tread respectfully in that sense. That's how I feel. That's my response to their call. And I'm curious to their response to my call. And what I've noticed is when I've done sessions or when I walk, like I just went for a walk, and you can tell I'm like all cold and now warming up. But there's something about, of course, what I notice, and then there's something about what shows up to let me know. And if I'm out and I feel stressed or there's a buildup of something, what I notice or what shows up, and we'll never know, that's the mystery. And it doesn't matter to me. But it's always the close to the ground animals that come up to say, okay, here we are. What are you going to do with that? Or they give me a shock, so I have to come out of whatever thinking. I don't know if it's a direct answer to what you're asking or what you were looking for, but that's how I walk around in learning. And that's how I think they call. And then the ritual is honoring that this is not only my home, it's their home. So I respond to that. And I don't take all the walnuts, and I don't take all the flowers, and I don't take their food, and I share all of that. That's a big part of the practice of being here, that this is not only my home. And then we have games. Yeah.
I love the games. It's no surprise that the squirrels always seem very partial to the walnuts.
Yeah, yeah.
Like their favorite nut. Uh-huh.
They're busy. I get a few each year, but
uh-huh. Well, I know that storytelling is a particular love of yours, and I'm wondering if you could, kind of feel into this question of what being a storyteller means to you, but particularly from this viewpoint of storytelling as a bridge or a vehicle of healing as it relates to entering the dreaming of the land, or what author Hugh Lupton, he calls, quote, stories at the back of the seen world.
mm-hmm. Well, there's certain stories that, and I always feel like, well, am I a storyteller? I don't know. I like stories and I tell them. It feels like a grand title. But there's certain stories that feel like they come from the earth, that are ancient in some ways. That it's hard to see that this was ever a man-made tale, and that ask us to view the world differently. And few teachers, Martin Shaw, but others have also said, storytelling is the wildest sense of truth telling, and not a truth. And that's the whole thing. It's not a truth. And I get so full and almost choked by the sense of having the one truth. And in a story, so many truths exist at the same time, along with nature, where there's so many truths and so many intelligence there in response to the world. And what I love about stories is that you tell one, and if you're outside, and maybe if you're inside and you can hear anything, but if you're outside, the whole thing becomes part of the story. Like the animals and the trees, and they're in there along with us, and every person there is seeing image and taking something away from this that I can't control and I can't dictate, but there's an understanding because it's it's beyond our personal dramas, and it's bigger. And the same way I feel when I'm outside is I'm part of something so much bigger than me, and how do I meet that? And we can't hurry to tie nature down, and we can't hurry to tie a story down. And maybe it's a response of being in this spiritual self-help whatever world for 14 years as a facilitator, that these stories have become more and more important, with not serving one truth, and that there's my truth, and then when I'm looking at the windows, there's the little sparrow's truth, and then there's the violet's truth, and then there's the Hawthorn's truth of what it is to be in the world. And I like that about that window into truth telling, and also opening up to that being completely different for each creature here. And in stories as well, there's so many, but there's the princess, there's the king, there's the villain or the wolf, and we can put ourselves in each archetype there, and learn something from that. I can place myself in a body of water and learn something from that. I can sit in a tree and wonder what it is to be in the world from this perspective. And I'm not done. I can never be done with it. But there's something about letting myself be taken by more truths than answers, and perspectives that is becoming one.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And I think it also, I don't know about you, but for me, I don't live in a place that I grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know the old stories of the land where I live, but I can know some stories just by connecting with those truths around me, like you said. So I think that
I grew
is
up far away from here. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there is that little bit of grief, or at times that sense of feeling lost, without kind of the old tethers, like old roots in the ground. But also every day there are these opportunities that new stories as animate beings are constantly being born and arising from where we are right now. So yeah. Well, I'd love to tune into a class that you call How to Become Invisible in a World That Demands to See Everything, which is a fantastic title. And so true. And I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit more about the sense of becoming invisible, doing more listening than speaking.
Yeah. Well, the whole thing came from a story I listened to that the amazing storyteller, English storyteller Martin Shaw told at a course, and it's in his book, The Smoke Hole. I can recommend it. And it just got, it just tickled or brushed up against my own my own hypocrisy in terms of, really sick of being online and available, and also deeply addicted to being online and available, and not really wanting to look at how much it is ruling my life to, have an opinion, share that opinion every time something happens in the world, feeling a pressure to speak to it or about it, and letting people know where I stand. And if I don't, then maybe be judged for being silent. The demand to know, and if you don't know, are you then ignorant because you haven't, stated all of what you know? And the pressure building of every time I have one of those urges or thoughts, or something happens, as I just said, that I need to state it all online. And I don't need to, but still, once you're there, once the ball is rolling, so to speak, or I've lullabied myself into a story that, my whole business is based on my presence there. And some days my being, my existence, who am I if I'm just here in my little cottage looking at the water? And anyway, all of that just became so. Now, what would happen if I was invisible, and not in canceling myself, but if I became part of the land and just shut up for a moment? What else then in me and around me would have the space to speak? And I think we're very well trained in speaking, and we're not as well trained as in actually listening. And we're not well trained in not knowing or being the beginner. Because I think there's a high demand for the opposite. So I wanted to challenge that in myself. And before I did the mini course, free course, I took a group out and I said, okay, I want you to go hide. And not as in a game, but I want you to go hide and just really allow yourself to disappear. No one's watching. What happens in your body, what comes alive around you, and what is it like to just decenter again yourself and become a part of it physically, not just as a mental concept. And it was a relief, and everyone felt exhausted. And I think that happens every time we relax or do something like that. It's like, shit, I'm so tired. God, I'm so tired. Which is interesting and not surprising. And the moving bit is to see how much life is living here, coming back to each truth and story of everything around this house, and noticing all this life and all this in this ecosystem that we don't notice. And that's striking. And especially in a country like Denmark, where I live right now. I was born in northern Canada, Labrador, where it's a different land and different wild, or more is proper wild. In Denmark, there's 2% undomesticated land left. 2%. And that's including coastal water. So here, to lay on the forest ground in a domesticated forest and notice all this wild that's still happening became a great mirror for what they could allow within themselves. And that was the basis of then I thought, okay, so let's explore it further. What happens if we prepare a little and just let that whole world here go and allow myself to become a tree, not hug a tree, but for a moment, become a tree here with it, sink in, or a beetle. And for me, that's it, really, of the practice and the ritual of what happens when I allow myself to do that.
I'm getting the sense of almost like a next level sit spot practice, where you're
Yeah.
just your your residence as a human. We're so used to being loud and noisy and just just dominating space. And I've had so many hysterical experiences of like when your energy, your resonance is tuned down and never exactly matching the space where you are, but closer, slowing down, um, that things come and like run over your feet, like a squirrel, or something lands on your shoulder, or I mean, it's just miraculous how with that shift in your tone, and kind of how you're moving through the world, um, what might be possible. But
And also, if you don't have your phone with you, the
uh,
urge to document,
mhm,
and that's the thing. Like we see this and then we document, or we're, walking around to take it all in, and we can't take it in through that thing. Like,
mhm.
so what happens if you don't document, you can't document, and you just watch that thing that just landed on your shoulder? What happens then for a longer moment? And I think that's the maybe not scariest, but most like mind-blowing thing was how my body on its own wanted to consistently and constantly document what I was doing and thinking in terms of how this could be presented to others instead of just, and I'm not alone
No.
there.
Yeah. In some ways, there's the joy of sharing something exciting with someone, like the
Yeah,
magic of that. But yeah, then also half the time missing the moment in the process of that. So yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course, it's both, and it's, I don't know if balance is the right word, but awareness of what is practice time and what is something else. What is intimacy and what is something? Maybe that's it.
Right. So maybe just like a couple who's having dinner and they're each on their phones, kind of we can kind of use that same metaphor. I don't know. That's what just popped into my head right now of just our desire to to catch it with our phone. Um, but then in the process, it's this block, to really seeing, or yeah, I don't know. It's ongoing.
Yeah, yeah. And there's not judgment, it's exploration, and
Yeah.
and just acknowledging, like I said in the beginning, noticing for myself that there's also a part of me that I was unwilling to really look at because I really don't like that part of how I am in the world more and more, just the last 10 years, and that it's, yeah,
Hmm. Yeah.
it's less intimate
Hmm.
and more overwhelming to have that window open all the time, having to take in so much, um, as you sent me before, just to touch on the eco grief, what's the balance there to also be sensitive to a system. And that's one thing for me is allowing myself to close that window into the world of knowledge once in a while and see how much can I actually digest and process, and how much can I do, like what can I actually do, some what can I have an impact on, and that's another dilemma in it. I can't save the world, and how much of the information can I digest?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that is essentially part of the necessity also of having boundaries the same way, in our digestive system, we have boundaries. These days we're digesting so much, so much. So I'm curious how all this is just kind of landing on you in this present moment. I mean, how do you feel like you're doing with this balance between being seen or having to have something to say, but then also, having moments of being able to connect and not have to do that? Like, how is that currently for you?
Well, it's many different things. I see myself feeling the need to state opinions less. Like I'm posting less compared to maybe last year. And exploring how much of that is fatigue and how much of that is just realizing that the complexity of it all is hard to put into a post. and and that there's more and more that I don't know. I don't know. And maybe a more comfort and and okayness with that. And then there's the other part of me where I feel overcome by grief of things that I can't change. And how, it's an open inquiry. How do I let that grief to exist and not become something where I collapse? How do I notice where I can have impact and where I can, do something and where I can't? And that's an open inquiry, but I also think that's what allows it to not become like a stress response fully, in terms of when I started this whole thing 14 years ago of doing courses, it was more stress related. And one of the things, the theories that we would talk about is the difference between people who experience stress and people who don't, and those who could do high risk or intense jobs could do that because they felt, that's what science said anyway, they felt they had the ability to impact their situation. And the stress that people felt was also to do with the fact that they felt they couldn't. There was no impact I could have. So as I get older as well, when I was a teenager in the 90s and very intensely angry about everything, which is, I think it's a good thing and it's great. And I see it now in my teen daughter and she's like, ah. And that's a part of it. And it's amazing. And I sort of miss that certainty that you have when you're a teen. And I definitely see she has. And but I also really want to explore, where do I feel I have impact? And I have impact on this little piece of land. It's not the world, but I have it here. And for those who come here, I can have some impact while they're here, in terms of noticing squirrel and hawthorn and swan and eagle. And I can have some impact on what happens here. And I can say thank you. And I can ask myself, when is enough? What do I have? And when do I notice that that's enough? And that's the greatest thing for me, is I can impact that. And then that will do something in the world. And if my three girls can go out into the world and say thank you for life, thank you for the food, thank you for nature, thank you for breath, for the air, for the water, then I've done enough. That's how I have to feel about it.
I hear you. Yeah, you kind of have beat me to where I was hoping we might head next, which is
Right.
just, and you've already revealed to us that you have little people in your home or slight, maybe, I don't know how old your eldest is.
Right. 14.
14, yeah. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, you've partially already answered this question in terms of just working with where you are and where you can have impact. But, just wondering, asking as a mama myself, who's kind of often struggling with this same quandary of just with the rapidness with which the world is changing, and the strangeness of how the world is changing and parenting in that strangeness. And the push pull between, like, when they were younger, um, like the malleability and the joy of just, I don't know, kind of absorbing it all, being outside all the time. And it's that letting go of my own agenda, um, in the places where you wish to have an imprint, but also, continuing to let them explore and have their own opinions and experiences. Um, yeah, so I'm just curious. I mean, of course, we know that everyone's experience of parenting is different.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, how that all is for you these days.
Well, there's co-parenting, which I find extremely challenging just between the dad and I who are still together and in the same house. And it's we see eye to eye on a lot of things, but even just that is difficult to navigate sometimes. It would be a lot easier if he was just out of the way and I could do my thing.
Uh-huh.
That and decorating and color choosing and all that. But I find it actually more and more challenging as they get older, really. And the other thing that I'm noticing is I'm it's so I'm full of pride and appreciation and also awe of what it is to see a human grow into being a young adult and um, there's a little impact by me, but it's a lot different than I thought it would be. Like just to see how the opinions the teen has of what the world should look like, and we had this fun thing. I'd like to think that we had a lot to do with it, and that my sort of activistic thing about nature and she got all that from me and she wanted a few years ago she wanted to go camping and she had this whole picture. I thought, oh, that's so cool. I rubbed off and I said, so where did you get that idea? Oh, I saw it in a Barbie movie at a friend's house. It's like, what?
Wow.
It's like, oh man, I thought I was really doing good there. Had nothing to do with me. And it was a crappy show that I didn't want her to watch anyway, that had given her this amazing idea to be outdoors more.
Hmm.
Um, I lost track of your question, but I find it really important to come back to letting her be invisible in her own way out in the forest, and noticing how hard that is for me to let go. And I thought it was hard with no sleep and with a toddler running around. But it's beautiful, complex, and hard as they grow to let them go, and to let them be human in their own way, and be invisible and not need me there and all of these things. And I'm also extremely proud to witness the humans that they are, but even this generation that is coming, what they're interested in, what their take is on life, what they want to rebel against. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to put this on them. My work and our generation's work isn't done, but man, they're really awesome. And I'd like to give them a lot more appreciation of how awesome I think they are than they're getting. They're a lot less spoiled than we give them credit for. Because, yeah, I lost track, but that's how it is. I feel it's a mess of all kinds of things, like my own, again, grief and extreme excitement at the same time. Of the window I thought I had was so much shorter and smaller than it feels like when you birth them into the world. And yeah.
You mean in terms of impact, in terms of your own?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The time they need my opinion at all.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think that when I throw up my hands, and you're just like just I think there's a lot of that, especially as I get older, that continued letting go, and instead just trying to continue to know what's, the uprightness and the solidity of your own kind of inner truth cord, in loving, the place where you are in loving this living world. And I think that that's the step that oftentimes is missed. Like my daughter was signed up for sort of like a natural sciences, kind of more crunchy, like science class. And, it really felt like the whole thing was focused on the world dying, and our obsession with that lens. So speaking of storytelling, and what stories are we telling our children? And it just felt really like the dissonance of that, of the story that I want my children to have. Speaking of ways in which to have impact. And they're very aware. Like they get so many messages everywhere of everything that's going on. And they're so compassionate, like you said. I mean, like what clicks for them ethically, or it's just very clear. And so they don't need further reminders of everything that's going on. They know what's going on. But instead, continuing to lean into that sense of that story and that sense of intimacy. And I think I saw an image the other day of some kind of young person's climate march, and one of the young people was holding a sign that said something like, "How can I know to take care of the earth if I don't know to love it first?" And something about that was like, ding, like, yeah. And so, continuing to begin from that place over and over again, I guess, is my work, when I forget, when I am overwhelmed with grief, and to be able to reorient all of us from that place again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm in Emergence Magazine's leadership course right now, and Jamaica Oritago. I sorry, her last name is just out the window right now, which is bad. But maybe we can
I'll look it
find
up.
that for the show notes. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But she said she ended her talk last Sunday, which I was like, yes, 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 exactly that. She said. The world doesn't need, or nature or the wild, the environment doesn't need our protection. It needs our right relationship to it.
Mm-hmm.
And um, and we're a lot, I think we like to be the hero. We like that narrative. Um, and it feels right to say to protect. But what is it to be in right relationship to something? And that's a really good place to start. What is it to be in right relationship? Maybe coming full circle to where we started. What is it to wake up in the morning and just acknowledge that there's a whole world with the pheasant family outside happening? And am I a huge disturbance? I will be when I go outside. And can we live next to each other? And it's disturbing me. I'm disturbing it. That's not what it's not about being non-disturbant, because every being on this planet is a disturbance. And it's not about putting a fence up around it to protect it. That how are we here together in right relationship to each other?
That I
As
love.
an open.
Yeah, to hold that
Mhm.
continuously.
Yeah.
And I love how that allows for the mess of things, the complexity and the nuance of things, because you spoke beautifully on invisibility, but then
Mhm.
also disturbance, and that is the mess, that's the mess of being in this entangled world. Um,
Yeah.
but continually holding that question of how to be in right relationship while leaning in that way. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to hear a little bit more about, anything, your offerings right now, or anything else that's coming up for you, and just anything else you wanted to share about your work in the world.
It's changing.
Yeah.
um, which is come at a little full force, that it's I don't know if you know these times where it's like I can't stop this.
Mm.
This is out of my control, but I've canceled everything that I had planned the rest of the year in person here due to the move. And also the next thing coming is my first little publication in Danish in May, and then a book in English that's being finished now. That's going to come soon. So that's really exciting
Really
to write.
exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, which weaves storytelling with the nature work and what that has looked like. And something you touched on of not, it's my story of not um, of being taken from one continent to the other as a child, and a whole sense of shift in culture and belonging and what that looks like, and also where to then find that. Um, and sneak secret, it has something to do with nature and the stories we tell. But that's definitely new. I'm doing something as a sort of follow up of Becoming Invisible that has to do with writing, and offering that's also going to be free in writing nature to life within and reflecting through writing. So I'm looking forward to offering that, of of using the written word in any way to reflect on what that relationship looks like. So I see a lot more stories and a lot more creativity unfold. And I don't know. I guess that's it. I really don't know what is to come, other than that. Which should be scary, but it doesn't feel like it at the moment.
Well, those are
Yeah.
some big projects. I mean, even those will ripple on for a little while. So it's very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I want to make sure we, have the information of all of that in the show notes so everyone can make sure to
Yeah.
learn more. So yeah.
And if anyone feels called to do the Becoming Visible, like it's a free course, but there's also a writing element. And I've published, which I personally really love, but people that took it who have written about their experience, I've published all of their writing on my website. So it's sort of it's become like a series of people from all around the world's conversations with the earth, and that's been a really really nice thing to read, to see, people, to have an insight into people's relationship with the land where they are. And yeah, so I that's still open, and I've really enjoyed it.
Wonderful.
That offering. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for just
Kendra.
spending this time with me, you kindred spirit, and just the way that you're sharing yourself with the world. And it's beautiful to witness. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, everyone. Well, so much gratitude for listening, for spending this time with us. And if it felt of benefit, please do consider leaving a review or subscribing to the podcast ongoingly from whatever your preferred listening source is. That way you can be notified whenever a new episode is released. May we continue to discover new ways while also remembering old ways of relating and being in kinship. As we continue to bring an open-armed adoration and devotion for this wild earth. And I look forward to being with you on the next episode.